Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the TomorrowPorts Connect session on smart port resilience. First, I will give a very short introduction about the project which is hosting this conference, which is the SPEED project, short for Smart Ports Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Development. And it's our mission to bring smart port entrepreneurs and users together, which is challenging definitely already in the port sector. And then COVID is not doing it any good. But we've also seen with COVID that resilience has become an increasingly important topic, and their digital technologies can have an impact. And that's what this today's session is about. And yeah, Valentin Carlan will now do the further introductions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wouter. I want to wish everybody a very warm welcome to this session. We have more than 100 registration to the event, so we are very happy to see you all here. Just some practical tips for this. Please use the chat to comment, ask questions, network there. You can also adjust the side-by-side view mode, so you're going to be able to see the presentation that is shown, but also the name of the participants list there. And last but not least, just enjoyed this session. The webinar structure of today, we have 15-minute keynote speaker. Then we will have a panel debate on problems that resilience arise there. We have a pitching session where we have two tech pitches that are going to give their insights on how they plan to tackle resilience in port. And afterwards, we will have two breakout sessions on each of the tech pitches. And then you can ask their questions or provide feedback on how you can use these applications or what can be improved there. And then finally, the last session, there's going to be a reverse pitching. There, the concept is the same. We have two port stakeholders that are going to present their problems, and we are going to open their two breakout sessions again, where you can interact there with the problem owners. I come from academia, but I will not go into definition, but I find this code applicable to this session. And this quote from Charles Darwin says, "It's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one more responsible to challenges, to changes." And that is what resilience is about. And please enjoy the session further. So I would like to open now the keynote session with Mark Button. Mark, you can share your screen and you can present the slides that you have prepared for us today.
Great, thanks very much. So hi everyone, really great to join you today. So my name is Mark Button. I'm a senior engineer at Arup, where I focus on decarbonisation and resilience for ports and coastal projects. I'm also a project lead at the Resilience Shift. So the Resilience Shift are a global hub for resilience best practice, linking with a network of members, partners, and collaborators. So today I really wanted to set the scene for the discussion ahead of us by sharing a short summary of our Resilience for Ports initiative, which has demonstrated the key role for technology as part of a future resilient port ecosystem. If you could move to the next slide, please. So the Resilience for Ports initiative is a whole systems approach to enhance the resilience of ports. And last year we undertook a scoping study which looked to explore this theme and importantly identify the kind of cross-industry actions we need to prepare ports for the future. So I thought I'd kick off with a definition, because if you ask 10 people about what resilience means, you'll probably get 10 slightly different answers. So for us, we define port resilience as the ability to both withstand and adapt to changing conditions, to recover positively from shocks and stresses, and therefore provide essential services now and into the future. Next slide, please. So there were two really key drivers for this piece of work, both of which are going to be really familiar to everyone on the call today. So one is that we recognize that ports are a nexus of multiple critical infrastructure systems, more so in the future as we move to net zero as well, and are absolutely critical to flourishing of our society and economy. So, recently in the UK, we've had kind of front page news stories about bookshops running out of books and pauses to car manufacturing because of congestion in some ports linked to both Brexit and COVID. So as the world becomes more complex, more connected, we think there's a risk of seeing lots more stories like this unless we come together and act soon. So the second real driver for us is that we recognize that ports are facing multiple transformations. So decarbonisation, the fourth industrial revolution with technology, and increasing onus to be socially and environmentally sustainable, and of course, preparing for a changing climate. So we think that really resilience can be a lens that brings these different challenges together and focuses attention on enhancing port performance as well as the wider outcomes. Next slide, please. So we started the scoping study by describing ports as a hub of systems. So resilience, of course, needs the whole system to function, not just individual assets. And as illustrated here, ports themselves are complex systems, but embedded in an array of external systems. So a port's resilience is, of course, deeply connected to the communities and natural ecosystems it's part of, as much as its physical infrastructure. Also, when we think about the elements that make up a port itself, we of course need to think about the physical aspects, but also the wider social, environmental, political, and economic features, and also how all of these elements relate to each other. So these interdependencies derive from the rules, norms, and procedures we'll see in the port, as well as culture, but also the flows of data, freight, energy, and people. So we recognize that actually very few organizations have the remit to take a whole systems view, and that boundaries are often there for a really good reason. But by bringing together the whole value chain from across the port system, and by demonstrating resilience value to everyone, not just to ports end users, we can realize change. Next slide, please. So the next part of our scoping study really was to start shaping actions by considering resilience challenges, both those that ports currently face, but as well those they may experience in the future. So these shocks and stresses are either short-term events or long-term pressures that could affect the functionality of ports. So for example, this image gives a flavor of some of the current challenges ports face. So this could be related to hinterland connectivity, could be about fragmented governance of a port system, or even emerging threats like cybersecurity. Next slide, please. Really importantly, we also considered a wide range of drivers for change that will affect ports into the future. So we explored which are most relevant to ports, where they might offer opportunities to actually enhance resilience, but also where they might create new vulnerabilities. Next slide, please. And through a series of workshops, we worked across the port value chain. So from finance to ports themselves, authorities and operators, technology providers, consultants, energy groups. We came together to understand the collective view on these challenges and opportunities, and then started to shape what type of cross-industry actions are needed to enhance resilience. Next slide, please. So just really quickly to zoom in on technology and digital drivers for change. We heard about some key opportunities to enhance resilience. So this included using technology to map and quantify resilience benefits actually beyond the port boundary to help make the case for investment. We heard about the opportunity to use data for predictive maintenance and root cause analysis, and also the potential for automated technology to reduce human exposure to hazards. Importantly, there are also a few potential new vulnerabilities flagged. So for example, we heard about the need to focus on the human element of the digital transformation So really bring people along on this journey. We heard about the risk of over-reliance on sophisticated risk models, and actually the need for us to think about managing deep uncertainty as well as known risks. And we also heard about the risk of fragmentation from new tools and data sets. So as you can see on the kind of quotes on the right, we heard a really wide range of ideas on actions, and we distilled this into a key initial recommendation, which is to develop a digital platform that can map this whole system of ports or of a port to bring together its stakeholders, understand the impacts of various shocks and stresses, and use this to shape future resilience enhancements. Next slide, please. So that was a really brief kind of run through our study. And I hope that by illustrating the need for a whole systems approach and by thinking about both current and future drivers, I've set the scene for what I think is going to be a really fruitful conversation today. So you can see much more detail about this online, or please get in touch if you'd be interested in exploring further. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark, for the very useful insights on that. And I see indeed that the main conclusion that you have made there is to have a sort of a platform which can help ports respond in time, and based on a lot of data that is generated nowadays. And that's why, as a second keynote speaker, we have invited Niels van Laar from the Port of Antwerp, who can as well give his opinion on what is port resilience, what are actions that are taken now by ports. So Niels, you have the floor. You can share your slides and present what is the status there with regard to the Port of Antwerp.
Okay, thank you, Valentin. You see my screen, I guess. So, as Mark already told, there are many definitions of organizational resilience, and one that I like is this one by Williams. It's because it involves the community, it involves the organization, it interacts with the environment. So this builds on further on what Mark just said. It's not about the port itself, but it's about the port in its environment, and actually in its very wide environment. If you take a port of like Antwerp, you can say, where does the port start? Is that here on the border with Holland and on the south in the city, or is that somewhere in China and ending somewhere in the US? The port starts in both definitions work there. One thing that I find important in this definition is it says adversity, but there is also opportunity grabbing. Resilience is not only about crisis. On the contrary, actually, it's if you think about, we always refer to the congestion now as a crisis, but if you're on top of 25 major container ships, then this is a pretty nice time. So it's also about grabbing opportunities always, and going further in it. This is a bit of a different and less fancy, sexy way of showing the environment than Mark used. But we can think of a port in three levels. There's the operational domain, where it's cold and dirty and wet. And that's where the ships sail, that's where the police operates, the fire departments, the VTS, the pilots, they all work there. That's what we see on the lower level here. On the top level, you have the policy making. You have the links with the regulators, with the government bodies, maybe with the municipalities, with labor organizations, but also with the media, with the surrounding communities, with the NGOs. And also a port is active there. And whether it is in the operational domain or in that policy domain, will at some point have an economic effect, apart then from the economic shocks and changes themselves. So resilience, and that's where we differ from risk management. Risk management would very much focus here, would very much focus on the fires and the explosions and the floodings and what you have, the operational disruptions. But there's also a lot of changes on societal trends and changing policies and political change, and how a port is viewed, the legitimacy of the port, the license to operate, really. Where in the 1970s and 80s, maybe ports were able to expand at will. Nowadays, there is a lot of bouncing back from communities, and ports have to be ready for that. Now, the nice thing, and that's basically what this picture is about, is that a port is working on these 3 levels at the same time. So they can leverage the 3 domains in their community building. Whereas if you think of it, most of the other parties here would be working on 1 or 2 domains. You would have a terminal working on, terminals work on the operational level, of course, and on the economic level, but maybe less on the policy level. You might have the police force here, which works on the policy domain and on the operational domain, but not on the economic. But port authorities work on these 3 domains, and so they can lever that social capital there. If we look at port resilience as a process, that means you have to cover or 3 stages of the change. Let's call it the change, let's call it adversity, what you want. There's the anticipation part, in which you have to monitor, in which you have to look at what is happening actually, and in which you can prepare. Second stage is the coping stage, in which you have to deal with the adversity, you have to deal with the change one way or the other. And in the third, there is the adaptation, the learning part. Now, you don't start just like that. You build on knowledge that you know from internal, that you know from other ports. There is a certain knowledge present that feeds into that anticipation part. Now, if we look at, for example, in the operational domain, the monitoring and the anticipation is most simple to explain. There you can say, okay, we have the operational planning, there is the development of relations, there is the contingency plans, where, for example, in a port like ours, we have lots and lots of meetings with, for example, the fire departments, but also all these parties around the port. And with the fire department, we'll come to that with, in a few moments. What we also do is we have to monitor the changes in the policy domain. So you really need those, how do you say, like an octopus, you need to be present on all places surrounding the port to understand what's going on. And of course, also with your economic actors. If one of your major clients gets into some way of financial trouble, you do want to hear about that very soon. But at the same time, you also want to pick up opportunities that might rise. Again, think of all these bulk carrier operators that suddenly started to move containers. They grabbed the opportunities. It won't last for years to come, but at least now they could grab the opportunity. In the second stage, you're coping with things, and then you really, your social capital must be ready by that time. Then you have to look up in a telephone book who can help you out. It's far too late. So you need to build on that social capital that you already have. You need to use your interaction, your previous relation with governments, regulatory bodies, your media response, of course, must be all right. Efficiently exchanging information, that's again on the field, and we'll come back to that in a moment. And of course, also prioritizing your response efforts. Where will you put your first response? Will you do that with your major clients? Will you do that? Where do you do that? That's an idea you have to get. And then, can we go back to the previous slide?
Yeah.
Sorry. And then finally, the adaptation part is about learning, first order learning in the very operational part. We need to add 2 tugboats and 3 police officers, but also in the policy part, in the deeper learning, how are we as an organization? What is it that we want to present? And I think this event, this webinar is very much an example of this, how ports put themselves much further than just being a center of logistics. Okay, now we can go to the 2 slides further. Next one, yeah. So if we want to be smart port and resilience, and you will see that the elements come back here in safety and security, it's about getting better data, earlier detection, looking further, expanding your horizon of monitoring. Better connection is better coordination, means also you can better cope with things. Better planning gives you more foresight in the port operations, of course. The more you know the then you enter in the realm of efficiency, of operational excellence there. It gives you also a better overview, and then I refer to Beirut here, of dangerous goods in the port. Smart ports can really help in getting a better overview of that. Better meteo predictions. Meteo is not, wind storms are not our major priority in the hurricane sense of resilience, but we do have trouble with wind. We do have issues when we have storms. Hinterland operations, again, better planning. Well, you can read it. Energy and environment, more accurate measuring, smarter use of energy resources, and also much faster detection of problems, and which allow you during the coping phase, for example, with oil spills, to react in a much better way, which brings you back on speed a lot faster. And then in interconnectivity, obviously, communication and data exchange, building trust, so important if you want to engage with the community. So in our case also, the port has a binding, between binding and playground really for innovation. When I think of drones and what a port can do there, you can really offer opportunities to that community to increase together and to become better together, which builds your resilience. So that's it for me. I have tried to give you in a very quick, very speedy way, and a little bit chaotic, for which I apologize, how we try to deal with it in the Port of Antwerp, trying to bring it as a process. And I don't know, Valentin, if Bert has arrived.
Yeah,
because
Bert is there, I think. No, I would like to thank you very much, Niels, for the presentation, and as well to Mark for opening up the scene. And indeed is right, what you have said here, anticipation and all the steps that have to be taken towards coping has to be very, very good prepared as well. And these areas on which ports have to be prepared are quite important as well. So that's why moving onwards onto the panel discussion session of this webinar, I want to pick up what you said about their being prepared, and what you said there about anticipating what are the next challenges that the port might be dealt with. So there, the first question that I would like to address to the question to the panelists there, it's what types of disruptions should ports be prepared for in the current business and the economic context there. And of course, we can have their answers from a safety point of view, or environmental economics, but also from technology and business contingency point of view. But let's take it step by step, and I would invite here Bert Bruggemans, Fire Department from the Port of Antwerp, on the safety. Which challenges are there to wait for the port, and how can we solve these challenges?
Okay, thank you, Valentin, and thank you very much for inviting me for this panel. And so just to give, it's not that easy to say what are the next resilient challenges in terms of concrete risks. I think we should focus exactly on the unknown risks and on the very complex problems that we are being faced with more and more. I think risk management has been focusing too much on unknown risks and trying to identify what risks we are facing. But the problem then is that if an unknown risk turns into a crisis, then we are not prepared. So I think we should prepare ourselves for unknown, big, wicked problems. And so, for example, one of the things we can do in order to prepare is make sure that our organizations that are dealing with risk and crisis are very good in themselves. We have a very strong fire service. Companies work on risk and crisis management. The port authorities work on risk and crisis management. But in order to deal with these unknown risks, we have to make sure that we are also, I'm sorry for the background noise, I'm in a fire station right now, but in order to prepare for those unknown risks, we also have to build a network. And for example, what you can see here is just the network that is needed in order to create live imagery of a fire in Antwerp. And so you see that if you only look at this from the perspective of one organization, then you have access to some limited imagery. But if you work together with the different organizations, with the police, with the Port Authority, with companies, with organizations that do this, then you can create a much broader view. And so this is what we need to do, in my opinion, in order to improve resilience, is not only work on the quality of the organizations itself, but mainly on the network between all the actors that are working on safety in the port area. So that is what I wanted to share in terms from the perspective of safety.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bert. Indeed, the ecosystem in which you have to react, also as a port stakeholder, as a port authority, it's very broad there. And of course, there is to be the balance that has to be made with the cost of being prepared, of the cost of resolving the situation itself there. So that's why we have as well in the panel Professor Thierry van Sander from the Antwerp University, and he might give us a clear answer there on the economics of having a resilient port there.
Thanks, Valentin. Indeed, yeah. The question is indeed not so much only on the types of risks, and I think Niels and Bert and also Mark in the beginning have already highlighted that very well. But indeed, it's also about the economics, about the impacts of such risks, about what is the cost of being resilient. So that's a question we should also ask. And I think to do that, we need to have a global framework, which is allowing to make really structural assessments of risks, to see what are their costs, but also what is the cost of mitigating the potential risks and the impacts that they might generate. And that's the way, I think, to create a real sustainability roadmap. And for that, of course, we need to take into account all types of risks as they were mentioned before. So to do that, we need to first of all identify all the at-risk assets, and that can be both physical assets, but also digital data assets, for instance, databases, etc., and quantify also those risks in a standardized way. And that's a bit problematic today still, because this is done very much in a dispersed way. There is no real well, by far not global and even not local standard, I would say. So that's something that we would definitely need. We also need to integrate the financial risk there. That's often overlooked. I mean, we look at physical risks as such, but everything has its cost, of course. So that's also important to quantify this. Then we also need to integrate knowledge on risk assessment of supply chains. Supply chain is not an easy thing. It's not a one spot thing. It's not like a factory or something, but it's something which enrolls over the globe, literally. So we need to take a specific perspective there on assessing those risks. Developing a framework to compare the results also of risk assessment and of mitigation measures under varying conditions on specific locations. That's again something that is to be developed. It doesn't exist today. We need to have design standards for high risk assessment and for port developments. Again, something which is lacking today. Each port is now working more or less on their own, trying to do what they can, trying to do what they think is good and what is important, but more standardization for sure is being desired there. And then finally, we also need standards for designing policies for governments, and in particular also for financial institutions, for instance. If we want to build out ports in a standardized way, in a safe, resilient way, then also financing of such developments will become important, and also that conditions are tied to this financing. So I think these are a number of key elements to ensure that ports and port ecosystems can also develop further as really resilient environments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thierry. Indeed, there is a a lot of work to be done in order to quantify these risks and then see there what is the best decision. And indeed, we had an overview with regard to the ecosystem. We had an overview with regard to the quantification of risks. But now I would like to move and see whether we have the right tools there, or there are challenges that are expected that we have to look at from a technological point of view. So that's why we have as well in the panel Geert de Wilde, COO of Nextport International, and the question that I would like to address to him as well there. Yeah, is technology prepared for resilient ports there, or should we expect there some challenges from that point of view?
Thank you, Valentin. Good morning, all of you. Yeah, let's zoom in more on the global supply chains and the role of technology. For me, resilience in a global supply chain is having the right processes in place to mitigate that risk of disruption in a global supply chain. And we have all seen over the last year or 24 months that it's becoming extremely difficult indeed to contain all the risks. We have seen, of course, the COVID outbreak having an impact on the way we buy, the way we consume, but also the way our producers have to order their goods in other places around the world. And recently, of course, the Ningbo port closure, which has a global impact in combination with the Ever Given in the Suez Canal, how to manage those disruptions. We will see definitely disruptions due to the energy transitions. We have capacity issues today in the US with more than 60 ports being idle, 60 boats, vessels being idle in front of the LA port. And we have, of course, also the continuous cybersecurity threats in our ports or in the global supply chains, just to mention a few. So having at least business contingency plans ready for major issues is key. And I think most of these disruptions can be absorbed by humans and or the digital tools they have at their disposal. And we have seen that due to those disruptions happening, the digital part and the digital tools have increased considerably and are helping us today to move forward. So it's almost obvious, I would say, that a more digital savvy company and or port and their supply chain will more likely be able to respond faster to any kind of incident or just be able to avoid risks thanks to predictions. And predictions can be achieved thanks to data sharing, visibility, transparency, predictability, and at the end also leads to a more sustainable and resilient supply chain.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Geert, for the answer. We understand that technology is there, is ready to be used, indeed. But moving forward toward the next question, technology is there, but what about the small and medium players? What about the small and medium ports there? And the second question that we want to address to the panel is, what do small and medium-sized ports need to do today with regard to this resilience on the ecological side, on the security, on the economics of that, and which roles should they take in mobilizing their small community there? Maybe we can have a view on this question from Niels van Laar from Port of Antwerp, representing a big port, but maybe you can give an answer from the perspective of a small ports as well there.
Well, considering that being resilient is not so different of doing what you do every day, but with a twist, I would think small and medium ports have to do what they do today, but with that resilience twist. And what do I mean with that? That is try to expand their focus, try to go further in monitoring, making also the connection with their community. And when I look at resilience, it starts from risk management. It starts from what are our major risks, and then going further, thinking out of the box. Okay, you cover the main risks that you have covered them probably already a long time. So now you have to take that step further. And the example you could think of there is again the congestion that we have today. You have COVID, and we could more or less have thought that COVID would come one way or the other. Pandemics have been predicted for a very long time, but nobody thought of the consequences for the supply chain, which we have today. And what does that do? So I think what small ports can do is no different from what big ports can do. And that is really think about what can happen. And if this happened, what can then happen? And try to get that focus, that mindset. It's much more about the mindset than it is about anything else. So, and that goes, and then you will end up with ecological, security, economic risks, and depending a bit on where you are in the risk spectrum, something will be more and something will be less. Like I said, hurricanes is not our major focus, nor are earthquakes, but depends where you are in the world, whether that would be. And then again, think further, think of the not so obvious ones as earthquakes and hurricanes.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and the question comes here, and then the focus on the small and medium ports here. Which role do they play in the entire supply chain? There is, of course, the saying that you need all the stakeholders in the chain to take the same actions there. Maybe Thierry, you can give some insights here on various types of actions of externalities that these ports can have, and whether they are here the bottleneck on how they can be stimulated not to be the bottleneck in offering resilient supply chains here.
Yeah, so, well, I agree with the point made just also by Niels, and whether it's a small or a big port, a medium-sized port, in the end, they all are facing the same types of risks and of issues that may request more resilience from their side. So generically, they all have to cope with the same issues in the end. Of course, the magnitudes, both of the causes and the impacts will be different. But in the end, generically, it's the same type. So we have, well, they all will feature to some extent nature-related, climate-related issues, big topic today. They all feature more or less issues with respect to digitalization and anything that may involve hackings, etc. So that may impact on all of them in the end. Terrorism, I mean, it's not away from the radar, by far not. So this is also something that they all may face, physical interventions in chains. And of course, indeed, also reinforced and highlighted by the recent COVID crisis, we have seen indeed that also health-related issues are playing an important role there. So basically, I come back to my pleading for really standardized approaches to this. And again, whether they are small or big, they all need to apply a standardized approach. And again, the magnitude of what they need to put in place will be different, because also the impacts of what happens will be different. But it would be good if this would be much more aligned and standardized among small and bigger ports. So they really need to talk to each other. And I hope that also the respective fora, which are there at the regional level, organizations like ESPO, but also at global level like IAPH, might pick this up and develop standards for this.
Yeah, indeed, standardization is very important here, and I would like to hit again the nail of technology here, because we know that there is a technology gap between small players and the big ones here. Yeah, I would like to address this question and invite maybe Gert here to answer this on how and which smart port technologies can make contribution to increase resilience in port, and how can small ports pick up these technologies.
Yes, if I could just, I just wanted to react on the previous question still, because I think I fully agree with Thierry and what has been said, but it's also important. We did once, and I wanted to share this with you, we did once a study in my previous company where I was still a freight forwarder, a study on how building resilience in our organization towards our customers is very important. And the outcome at that time was very surprising. At least it was for me, because the outcome was that resilience was available in the company where we thought we have to invent something new, but it was there. Instead, our staff was finding everyday solutions for to keep on moving the cargoes for our customers. But it was all in their brains. So it was with the people. The people always found new ways in finding solutions on a day-to-day basis to keep on moving those cargoes. And as today there's an overload on information available due to social media and news channels which we have, it's of course becoming more challenging to just use our brains. And we need indeed that standardization. We need the tools and the digital tools also to capture and to make sure that adding information, adding standards, and also making sure that the right procedures are in place in a small or in a big organization, that it's captured and that it's well being preserved in case it is needed. So on the role of technology can contribute to increase resilience of ports. Okay, there are many examples today. We started with data sharing in the Port of Antwerp back in 2016 with Nextport, providing transparency and visibility to bring it in reach of the different supply chain stakeholders, private and public. And I think we have to look at it from a perspective much broader than just a port, which is a node where goods are coming together from a land side and a maritime side. We do see that there is a lot of technology being deployed already today in the last mile delivery, with APIs being much available to transport companies, initiatives around standardization. I think on the DCSA, for instance, which is doing great efforts on having processes in place which are standardized for the container industry. And all of this allows us to predict possible disruptions in the supply chain. And vessel arrival information, dangerous cargo, which is on board. And Niels gave already some of those examples in his presentation. I think they're all valid and true. The environmental impact of a vessel arriving in a place or spillage, all of that, and to make it visible is in reach. To go into that prediction mode, thanks to technology, artificial intelligence, and data sharing, is now a given. It's possible. Companies are using it. Adding the end-to-end dimension, I would say, gives that we get the possibility to interact, or a shipper could today say, my cargo is not going to leave to a specific port, I'm going to divert to another one, and I'm going to help not just to have piling up cargoes at a certain place. Adding extra risks, extra containers means that more cargo has to be traveled over the road instead of barge and rail, for instance. Slow steaming, alternative ports. With those existing visibility tools, we can move cargo or continue to move cargo. Critical digital infrastructure, Port of Antwerp, Nextport today has been nominated as critical digital infrastructure. So I think it's vital for companies who are producing cargo in a port that they are at any given time able to share the data on a trusted infrastructure. And that trusted infrastructure comes, of course, thanks to the working of community, and brings, of course, more resilience into the port. We are all dreaming of digital twins, which is a good example of how smart port technology is made visible. Different data layers on top of each other, which allow at a certain moment to play with that data and to simulate disasters happening in a port, measuring the impact on supply chains. Yeah, of course, that has a great value, but also great value could be just to have that visibility on when a custom clearance has been done, to make sure that no disruption is taking place further down in that supply chain. We have built a use case in the domain of public and private companies working together after a discussion I had with Bert of the fire brigade, and maybe Bert can zoom in a little bit on that. We have built a use case in the Port of Antwerp with the Antwerp Fire Brigade, which also shows that sometimes small data can help a lot in an intervention of a fire brigade.
Yeah, maybe Bert, you want to pick up
I will certainly pick up on that. But first, to zoom out a little bit, I think it's very important because I hear a lot about standardization. And of course, I agree with the fact that you need some standardization in order to build up resilience. But resilience is a very difficult concept. It's a very complex concept in itself because in order to achieve resilience, you need, of course, those defensive strategies like standardization and having very good procedures in place. But you also need to be very adaptable and have offensive strategies in order to deal with unknown problems and things that you couldn't imagine in advance. And the essence of what my organization does is dealing with problems where, for example, resilient plans and business continuity plans and crisis plans failed, and the safety is threatened by an unknown incident that we were not able to prevent. So that is important. If you look at resilience, it's also a bit about managing paradoxes and trying to be offensive and defensive at the same time. That makes resilience very complex. And what we did together with Geert and Export was using technology and innovation, which is, in my opinion, also a part of building up resilience, in order to deal with those unknown problems and to gather as much information as possible about the situation that we do not know in advance what will happen. And therefore, we asked Geert the question whether we could use information about containers in the port of Antwerp and containers that were traveling to and from the port of Antwerp, and use that information that is known by Nexport when an incident happens. And the last thing is also very important because we don't want access to the information outside of an intervention context, because that's not our, we don't care about what's in a container as a fire service outside of an intervention context. But when, for example, there's a car crash on the highway around Antwerp, the ringway around Antwerp, and there's a container involved, then we do want to know what's inside the container. And then we do know that information on the spot in order to make our strategy, our offensive strategy, in order to deal with the incident. And so we managed to build an interface between our intervention software and the data that is available with Nexport in order to receive the data and the information from containers during incidents. And so, for example, our dispatching or our people on site can enter the container number and then get all the information that is available about that container on the spot. And I think that's a very good example of how you use existing networks and build new networks in your port area, and use capacities and innovations that are already out there and being used, for different purposes in order to build up your resilience. And I think that's also very important. You cannot do this only in a big port, because in a big port often means are available to do this by yourself or build up your own system. But it's mainly important in small and medium ports to build up those networks, because you can combine the efforts and with less effort still achieve a very good result. And that's something we did in this particular case. The information we can deliver to our staff while they're on the scene, extinguishing the fire, bringing themselves into harm's way, and we can make their work more safe, more effective by using data that is already out there, networks that are already built, and just connecting to existing networks. I think that's a very important part of building up resilience, and the capacity to use technology in that is really a driver in order to improve that resilience.
Yeah, great. No, that's indeed a very good example. That's a great example how the data can be used in order to take decisions, to take the right decisions there. I mean, and then the stakeholders, and also at an individual level, you can easily take the next step and say, yeah, please, I want to share data. And because I know that data, it's very useful for you to take the right decision, to save my cargo, to have the right intervention, and also probably to protect me on a personal level. So yeah, this case study, it's indeed an example of how this data sharing can be enabled there. Yeah, that's great. And I know that this is one example. Do you have maybe other ideas, maybe from your practical experience? What are best practices there on how professional environment and large ports did apply the concept of resilience, of developed resilience concepts there?
there are very different examples of what you can bring together. For example, in this technology realm, you can combine or use cameras that are already out there, or measuring tools that are already out there. Just the question is, when do you want to use the data? When do you want to have the information? That's the main question, not whether it's out there, because there's a lot of information out there. But what we learned over the last years, and what in my opinion is the best practice in our port area, is the fact that there's a lot of out there, but people don't know what's out there. And so you have to build up networks to share this information. For example, we have built a safety region in the Port of Antwerp, where we are combining all the safety partners, being the Port Authority, the emergency management agencies, the crisis managers, the fire departments, whether they are from public or private, because we also have private fire departments in the companies, the companies themselves, and we combine them all in a network and try to share information, but also make sure that we do practical projects together in order to improve resilience in the Port of Antwerp, whether it's alerting the public or building up a network of fire departments doing mutual aid and deciding what equipment to buy in order that we can improve our response capacity and so on. I think that's one of the best examples of what we are doing. But we are doing the same in the technology realm, where also the Port of Antwerp, the police, the fire department, the city, we are sitting together and sharing best practice and sharing information, trying to do practical projects together. For example, we have tested a 5G network in the Port of Antwerp in order to improve communication between the different partners acting on this safety issues. And so for me, the best practices are often related to the success of building up networks. And if you build up better networks between the different partners, then automatically very strong projects, very strong improvements of resilience come from those networks. And the difficulty is that it's very difficult to when you start up a network, to make very concrete what you're expecting from this network, and to make it measurable and to set goals for the network, because you need this phase of getting to know each other and taking your time to build up trust. And once it's there, then it goes very fast. But to build up that trust takes a lot of time and takes a lot of effort. So that's I think the best examples in my domain come from building up that network.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, network is very important here. Thank you very much, Bert. I also see that Jerry Clark, Captain Jerry Clark from Port of Portsmouth has joined now the meeting. He was as well in the panel. So I would like to give him the word as well to add up to this. What are their examples with regard to best practices, and what is the impact of not being resilient on supply chains?
Yeah, Valentin, Jerry seems to be facing connectivity issues. And the irony, of course, when we're talking about smart port resilience here. So Jerry is a pilot also in the Port of Portsmouth. So sometimes he has to call in from very unlikely places, and he's experiencing some issues now. But we do have a couple of questions from the audience.
Yeah, I think it's better to move to the audience then. Okay, no, thank you very much, Walter. Yeah,
okay.
Are there any questions that you could raise from the chat?
But I see Jerry is back in. So Jerry, if you can hear us, I think the main question, or Valentin, please, you can continue with your main question that you still have for him.
Yeah, the question for Jerry, what is the impact on the supply chains of not being resilient? Maybe you can have examples there from your practical experience as being a pilot in the Portsmouth port. All
Okay, I think we need to crisis manage a little bit here.
Yeah.
All within today's topic. So let's continue to the questions. They are very close to I think what Jerry is also quite interested in when it comes to resilience. We had a couple of questions that ask us in Antwerp. We would say boter bij de vis. So where's the money? If we talk about small and large ports, we heard from Niels indeed, there is, and from Thierry, that there isn't such a big difference. But one big difference is, of course, the resource. So I think we had some great examples indeed that they face the same kind of problems, and partnering, networking is definitely the way forward. But when it comes to problems, actually, there are two related questions from the audience. So I'll just launch both of them. And they are very hard ones to answer, I have to say. So first of all, which seem to be the areas of greatest vulnerability, and are there some, let's say, leading indicators to at least spot them? That's and then specifically for ports. So what are the leading areas of vulnerability? Second of all, when we then talk about innovations to solve or to, well, it's a wicked problem, so we never really solve it, do we? If we talk about innovations to at least prepare better for resilience challenges, what are the areas, the application areas from a decarbonization point of view here then, but also from other points of view? What are the key application areas for those innovations where it can either have the biggest impact, or taking it from the small port perspective, where they, with more limited resources, can also be effective? And we've already heard an example from Bert, but perhaps some other people from the panel or Bert also still want to join in on these two questions. So areas of vulnerability. Yeah, hi Bert.
Can I add to the first question? Just some thoughts on the first question. First of all, if you look at risks, if you want to quantify risks, then the classical approach is by looking at what risks you expect, determining their likelihood and their impact, and then determining the size of the risk. So you can determine what risks you expect. That's a classical approach, but most of the main risks or the main problems we have faced the last years, for example, the pandemic, but also terroristic attacks. For example, very big industrial incidents like Chernobyl and Bhopal and so on. They were not predicted. They were not in risk analysis because their impact was often too big and their likelihood too small. And so we often forget to look at the really impactful risks, the black swans, and those are risks you cannot predict. That being said, I don't really believe in the success of quantifying risks. But that being said, I think some of the big risks ports have to look at are often outside of come from outside of the port, are external risks like climate change. I think that's really major. That will bring major problems to our ports. But also societal unrest, unease, like. In Western Europe, we see now movement against the pandemic regulations, but we see in general a lot of societal unrest. I think that's something to look at in your risk perspectives. Those kind of risks often are forgotten when we look at when we make our risk assessment. So I think looking broader, taking into account external risks are things we should do if we look at the risks for port. In order to quantify them, that's of course a very difficult thing to do because they are in themselves not quantifiable. I think when we look at wicked problems, quantifying is often very difficult.
Yeah. Can we conclude that a little bit, Bert, by Roosevelt's famous quote that plans by themselves are useless, but it's the planning itself which is indispensable, so the preparation for those
absolutely risks. Yeah, that's absolutely a very correct way to look at it.
Yeah. Okay, Niels, I see you've also raised your hand. Still a comment?
Yeah, and I want a small intervention here because we are a broad audience also from the participants. If you have your own opinion about how this risk can be mitigated or what are examples of best practice, please place them in chat. That is going to be very useful as well for the participants.
Okay, Niels.
Yeah, can I share my screen a moment? I want to show a picture.
Yes.
It's my favorite picture that I always use. What you see here when we talk about risk, you have the major risks, and but there's also the accumulation of very small operational risks. And this picture is a beautiful picture of it. What you see, if you don't know what's happening, it's an innocent inland vessel which moves under a bridge, and there's a truck driving over it. What I see is an inland vessel loaded with can't remember how many tons of ethanol, so a highly flammable product, which passed the red light. The lock doors were already open, but the bridge wasn't open yet for technical reasons, whatever, but it passed the red light. So it's just a little risk adding to another little risk. And then we have the third little risk, that's the truck driving over it, loaded with dangerous goods. Now, all of this is happening on a bridge which connects the south part of the north part. And actually, what you don't see, but you could have seen it on the CCTV camera pictures there, is that the ship is trying to make headway as fast as possible to pass under the bridge, to get a little bit deeper. So this was a disaster waiting to happen, with all on their own, very, very small risks. Not risks which are normally handled well, but the accumulation of it would have given us a major explosion, probably damage to the bridge, and a disruption, a serious disruption of the north and the south part of the port.
Yeah.
So
okay.
It's not always in the major risks. It's sometimes also in the accumulation of smaller things there.
Yeah. So I guess this first question also of looking at what are your greatest vulnerabilities. Just this simple bridge could have put the entire port of Antwerp out of business for a very long time. That's one thing to manage, but indeed, as both you and Bert have said, many risks go unnoticed. So do some wargaming, do some scenario planning, get out of your comfort zone, and don't just ask for nice, neat risk quantifications. Thierry, you also raise your hand.
Yes, I would just like to add one point. I fully agree, of course, with the previous points made. I would just like to add that, again, there it's important also to involve the various levels of authorities and also the wider community. I mean, there's no point in which a port on its own can develop such a plan. That will always be an incomplete plan. There's no way that ports are capable of doing this. I mean, they also don't live on an island. So they interact, of course, with the rest of society, with the surrounding communities. And that's why it's important also to do it, I would say, even at as high a level as possible. I mean, we really need standardized overarching approaches rather than individual solutions, which are different again in each and every port. Of course, the focus and the points of attention will be slightly different, but the way in which this is being tackled generically should be as uniform as possible, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that, Thierry. And there was also actually a question in the audience, but I don't think we'll have the time to treat the question in depth now. But good news is, in the reverse pitch, there is actually one of the reverse pitches from PSA by Bart Heijmans, which will be dealing with the issue. And the question there was, especially in the energy transition and moving from fossil fuels and so on, what's the best way to approach it? Should it be from the government top down, or should it be bottom up? And we know that the truth is usually a bit more complex and it requires all of them. But that's definitely something we can. So stay tuned, Josh Morrison, for that question will definitely be very relevant also in the reverse pitch by PSA. I think now, Valentin, we need to move on, right?
Yeah, indeed, we need to move on to our next session in the webinar. Okay. Thank you very much to all the panelists for your contribution. It was very, very valuable insights about port resilience and how we can tackle it. But now we can dive into more details of solutions, of potential solutions, concepts that can help port resilience and supply chain resilience. So therefore, we have invited two tech providers. One is Haka and is represented by Yannick Spielemakers, and he is going to talk about empty container exchange enabling port resilience. And the other tech provider, Envision, represented by Dennis Kersten. Envision is also part of a Pioneer project, a project where us at the University of Antwerp are also involved there, and they are going to tackle in their project as well how they can build a smart energy management system. So what is going to happen right now? We are going to give them 10 minutes to pitch their idea, their solution. And then we are going to open up the breakout sessions on which you can choose which solution you found the most interesting, and then you can go and do one-on-one talks with them and ask further questions there.
And luckily, Ed, we have a professional moderator, professional tech pitch moderator with us. So Kees Willem Korneef from Port Excel, who is also a partner co-organizing this, will lead everything into hopefully efficient and interesting path. Thank you, Kees Willem.
Thank you. Before Yannick takes over the floor, good morning, everyone from the rainy Rotterdam. Some warm regards on behalf of Port Excel. We have been listening and talking about challenges in ports, and luckily we believe as a maritime accelerator that some of the solutions come from scale-ups and startups and SMEs. And this part of the webinar is crucial, I think, also for you to be inspired by both Yannick and Dennis, who will share their insights, but also to have some interactive options there. So please, after the presentations, and there will be the breakout rooms, collect your questions and try to have this exclusive opportunity to talk to them and to listen some of the solutions they have for the challenge that have been addressed today. So it could be quite exciting for them as well. So Yannick, can you take your presentation 10 minutes and also perhaps raise the questions you have for the audience? And then afterwards, Dennis will take over. Good luck.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay, can everybody see the slides?
Okay, Yannick.
Okay, first of all, before we start, I want to thank Wouter and Valentin for inviting me to this very interesting and very relevant webinar. Also, all the people that joined this webinar, very welcome to listen to my presentation. Okay, so I'm Yannick Spillemakers of Hakka, and Hakka is a community platform where transport companies work together on a daily basis to run their business more efficiently. So it is really a place where they work together. So that's really important. Transport companies, they stand side by side, and they, of course, they have their own business, but they are not alone in this, and they work together, and they optimize their business and also the port business. And one of the tools that they use for this is Hakka, and we are very proud to have all these transport companies on our platform. So what happens on Hakka today? So how is the port resilience enhanced today? Like I'm gonna give you a few examples. So the first thing I want to talk about is the marketplace. So our marketplace is this is where the container rights are exchanged and the empty containers are exchanged. So the container, if you're in the port business, I guess most people know this, but it's not bad to repeat it. There is always, if it's an import right or an export right, if you go to a load or non-load location, you always have to go full to the unload location, and you always drive empty back to the port. So 50% of the containers that you see on the road are empty. Now, this problem can be shared on Hakka. So transport companies can say, I'm coming back empty with a 40-foot high cube Hapag-Lloyd container from Valenciennes tomorrow around 10. And then other transport companies, they can pick up on this and say like, oh, but that's interesting. I have to load the container around that time, not very far from Valenciennes. So maybe you can take over my ride. So what happens then? They use the same container, the same truck driver, the same truck, the same chassis, everything the same for the second transport. So now we just saved 500 kilometers of empty rides. So that's the principle, and that's what transport companies do on a daily basis on the platform. So then we went a little bit further. So today they are exchanging this information. They are seeing it in their email box on the platform. They have to look for it. They look on the map. They use the filter to find the right, to make the good combination. Now we introduced the technology called matching. So what does it do? It actually looks at all the information of the marketplace. It can also look at all the information from transport planning systems. Like you can, if you want, you can share all this information with the platform, and the algorithm will try to find collaboration possibilities. So that's the principle. So you don't have to look for it yourself. There's an algorithm going over all these thousands of transport rides, connecting them all together and giving suggestions to the planner. And then the planner on this information can decide to work together with another transport company or not. So these are two products that we are using today, and they are enhancing port resilience today. Now there is a partner that we work with, and they are called Symbio, and they are enabling business-to-business payments. So what companies do, they put money in their wallet, and you can use this wallet to make a purchase which is relevant in logistics center in the port business mainly. And the easy thing is it's just one click. You know, it's just one click, and you can pay a service. So that's why we partnered up with Symbio to make a product, and we call it the Container Hub software. So now today, with, for example, the changing yard opening times, we noticed that there is a lot of container hubs. And so transport companies are using these hubs to organize shunting between the terminal and their hubs, and preparing all the containers for international transport, for example. And it used to be just the big ones using it to optimize their own business. But you start seeing that they also are offering these services to other transport companies, smaller transport companies. So we came up with this software. So what can you do? You can, as a transport company, you can say, well, I want that, I want to go to that hub, and I want the owner of that hub to make sure that my container gets in time on the terminal, and I just want to drop it off, and the hub should take care of it. So they go online, they go on Hakka, they fill in the order, they use Symbio to pay in advance, and then they just go to the site, drop off their container, it's taken out of their hands. Okay, so all the invoicing, all the stuff is taken care of. So we use this on Hakka. So there is over 500 companies on Hakka. So they have a market in one go of over 500 companies, and you don't have all the administration hassle, all the chasing of the payments, all that is done. It's all taken care of by the Container Hub. So yeah, we were thinking about this, and we have all these individual products. And when we think about port resilience, so we want to do something new. We want to do something cool that will enhance port resilience even more. So we used all the building blocks that I just explained to you, the products that are already active today, and we tried to link them all together. Okay, so imagine that it's not just a container hub, and it's not just focused on road transport, and there is also an inland terminal connected to it. And the inland terminal, they can offer to bring your container to the main terminals, the big terminals, or the same with a rail terminal, or some terminal that has a rail connection. So they can offer the services as well. Okay, that would be cool. But yeah, they can use a hub software, and people can just go there and book it, and they can just start using it. Okay, that's real nice. But yeah, there's also the matching algorithm. So maybe when we know that somebody is offering a ride from some load location to the terminal, well, we can suggest not just, oh, talk to this transport company. We can also suggest, why don't you drive to this container hub? It has an inland connection and it will bring your container straight to the terminal. Everything's taken care of. So we are really giving the suggestions to the transport companies. They can book it online. They know in advance how much it's gonna cost. They just buy it. They go to the hub, they drop off their container, and everything's taken care of. So this is really a tool that can enhance multimodality. And I think that multimodality is something that we will need to have a more resilient port.
Okay, Yannick, you got like 1 minute. Is that okay?
Sorry?
You got like 1 minute to summarize perhaps your presentation, or are we done there?
Okay, yeah. So I'm a fast speaker. No, that was my presentation. So I hope that I gave you some insights on how we work today and what our vision is on how we can work tomorrow and how we can contribute to a more resilient port for the future. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Yannick. The audience will have an opportunity to have an exclusive chat with you later on for 20 minutes if they visit your breakout room. So I did already encourage them to prepare some questions. But first we will listen to Dennis Kersten from the Netherlands, representing his solution to this resilience kind of challenges we have in the port from a complete different perspective. And again, we hope to inspire you with this SME. Dennis, the floor is yours, and also good luck with your presentation.
Thank you, Kees Willem, for the introduction. I already started to share my screen. My name is Dennis Kersten. I'm a director in Division Digital, based out of Rotterdam, tasked with business development, but specifically also now focusing on ports. From our end, we are really proud to be part of the consortium with Port of Antwerp for Pioneers, where we are also implementing an energy management system. And today, my presentation will be about sharing with you more and broad about what we can do also for other ports. So driven by the Paris Climate Agreement, what we see is, especially for ports as hungry energy infrastructures, that there's an urgent need for change. This journey has already started in many ports and harbors across the world, with aim to become greener, reduce cost, but also generating new revenue models and services. But most and above all, also become more resilient to grid fluctuations and dependencies from others. Looking also at ports locally, like for example in Antwerp, we see already windmills on the quay, solar parks and rooftop solar being installed on garages, buildings and other locations. Terminals implementing charging poles to charge their electrical vehicles, both before the fence and behind the fence for the equipments, but also charging cars that are coming in on transport from Mexico or other regions to give them an additional charge. We see demand and regulations related to the fact that ships are not allowed to burn diesel anymore to generate electricity in the port. So there are shore power initiatives, electrification of cranes and what have you. So there are more and more electricity applications in the port. These are typically silo initiatives, and we believe that there's benefit to connect and optimize all these assets in one energy platform to manage both, on one hand, the generation and also the loads. And it gives great insight in terms of net zero, where are you, and also all CO2 related equivalents. And this is basically where we come in. I realize that maybe not all people in the call have heard of Envision, so let me briefly explain something about our company. The company was founded basically already 14 years ago with the initial ambition and goal to produce wind turbines. These were initially produced out of Denmark, Germany, and later on produced out of China, and actually it became quite successful. So at the moment, we're the 4th largest wind turbine producer. And as you can imagine, with the production of wind turbines, there was also a need for data collection, optimization, control. And from here, we basically started to develop our own IoT platform specifically for renewable related assets. And per 2019, this also became a separate entity within Envision. And this is also the time where basically I joined the company. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we already have quite some amount of energy connected to our platform, 300 gigawatts, 130 million devices. So this really varies from solar plants, from wind turbines, from sensors in the field, what have you. And our footprint in digital at the moment, it's around 800 people. Our head office is based out of Singapore, but also in Europe, we're growing very fast. So at the moment, we are approximately 120 people. But we also have a global presence in other regions, like in Americas and in Asia. So if you look at our solutions, we basically have three groups where we focus. On one hand, we have the intelligent renewables, very close to well, the wind turbine and solar monitoring, what I explained earlier about. Same we do for storage, hydro applications, and also recently for hydrogen. And we have solutions which are linked for smart infrastructure. And we believe this is also very relevant for the port, as typically ports are also landlords, landowners owning certain districts which need refurbishment from warehouses, but also building new buildings and houses. And last but not least, also to support carbon management in terms of scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. Without going into too much detail of all the technical things we do, here a short overview of the different sectors where we're active, looking at industrial prosumers, which are the global parks of wind, solar, port solutions with a lot of projects done in Singapore with also PSA. We look into commercial buildings, campus sites, and real estate. So what do? We have solutions both on the generation end to monitor control, but also to do the demand side, which is more looking into load profiles, load forecasting, and also load optimization. As you know, microgrids or local initiative communities cannot be just standalone. There's always a connection to the grid. So we also have services to support market participation, think about frequency response to help local DSOs and TSOs to do their job. And as we're collecting a lot of data, also this data can be used for maintenance and maintenance planning. As the energy transition is going, also our solutions are growing. We have a platform which is based on open source technology, also with APIs to integrate to all kinds of other tech providers and platforms. Here an example of a module that we recently developed, more looking into the details around monitoring the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions with the idea in the end to abate and also to mitigate the CO2. But we also do studies and prototypes for new solution developments and enhancements like the hydrogen example that I'm showing you here on the screen. So to take you through quickly to some projects we have done in the past. This is a project we have done in Singapore, where we have implemented an energy management system primarily to support load optimization. What makes this implementation slightly unique is that it's also able to do the conversion of the 50 hertz from the grid to the 60 hertz on the ships. Another example is a project we did in Thailand, which is a smart campus, so very similar to a district, where we have implemented various energy management systems with the ambition to have what we call an all-time zero energy export, meaning that we're energy neutral on a yearly base. Another project that we've done with the Port of Singapore is one I'm displaying here. You can basically see two loops. On the left-hand side, it's more the behind-the-meter optimization, improving self-consumption and optimizing the energy costs. And on the right-hand side, you can see a second loop where we have leveraged the platform together with the PSA to provide also frequency regulation and demand response types of biddings also to the local market. And last but not least, the project to highlight is the one that we are currently implementing in the Port of Antwerp in one of the bigger terminals as part of the Pioneers project. Here, Wind aan de Stroom basically has installed wind turbines. They're investing themselves also in solar with the ambition to maximize the utilization of the green energy generated by the assets. And the ambition of the battery is basically to increase the percentage of green energy consumption from a 60 to a 75%. But of course, yeah, as not always known, we will find out along the way how far we can go. What makes this use case unique and interesting is they also have all kinds of interesting loads, like for example, the lighting, the cranes, but also the EV chargers, not just for the staff, but also charging cars that are coming in. And this will give us a lot of good insights, not just for this terminal, but also for other terminals in the port, but also for other ports throughout Europe and outside, to see how these types of solutions can help, on one hand, the terminal to become resilient to energy fluctuations, but also what is the business case and investment that is needed to make this happen. So to conclude, so what the future holds. What we see, different markets, different countries, especially looking at UK, where you can do a lot of money with fluctuations, while maybe Netherlands and other countries are less, but also new technology will come, and prices of batteries will go down. But yeah, as there's an urgent need to make things moving, we basically say, you know, as the clock is ticking, we simply need to move ahead. Briefly, without going too much detail, some considerations of clients and other people we speak to, different use cases, can you combine, what type of battery do you need, and all these kinds of services we can provide and take this journey together. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention. I hope it gave you some food for thought and some inspiration for further discussion. And I'm looking forward to further explore with you. To give you a sneak preview for the breakout, I have already prepared some questions, but of course, I'm very willing to add more on the list. So thank you very much. And I would like to hand back to Kees Willem.
Hey, Dennis. Well, thanks very much for an inspiring example, I think, of becoming resilient as ports for this, the case of this webinar. So now I think we have some like 15 minutes available for you as audience to choose to the two different breakout rooms. I hope you have some questions or some suggestions for both Yannick and Dennis. We will also go with you to the chat room and to summarize Wouter and myself what's happening in those chat rooms. And after like 15 minutes or so, we'll go back to the plenary session here. So I think, Wouter, if you can guide us and the audience towards the two different breakout rooms, then I hope there will be some opportunity to be interactive after carefully listening for a big hour already. And let's have some chats in the chat room.
Okay, so sorry to be cut off. So sorry that you were cut off in the middle of a sentence.
It's okay. Thank you for moderating.
Okay. Well, yeah. Thank you for all the great insights. So, Kees Willem, I hope your session was quite all right.
Yes, of course. We had a very good session. I think Yannick was given some questions from a classroom at AMS. And I think these questions actually rose to some kind of suggestion, perhaps to have a marketing kind of pivot for Hakka to also introduce the impact on the SDGs that you are making there by reducing unnecessary costs or empty truck rides. So there's been some good discussions there. And I think Yannick, well, maybe Yannick, you liked the questions as well, and perhaps it will give some follow-up from the breakout room.
So thank you everybody joining the breakout room. There were really interesting questions. There were questions on trust, like on how does trust work in this collaboration. We have a few tools there to make the trust bigger. Like we only share necessary information for collaboration. We don't share customer information, stuff like that. So we had questions on that. We also had questions on the payment, like how is the payment platform is working, which kind of services can I buy with it. Mainly logistic services, like at the terminal, you can skip a queue, or you can buy a certificate online, or you can buy for Hakka services, you can buy a shunt to the terminal, stuff like that. So these were a few of the questions that came from the people from IMS. So thank you very much for that, and also thank you for the suggestion for the marketing tool.
Okay, okay, great. Nice to see that the AMS is also in inciting collaboration there. On our end, so I think Dennis had well, he did, the first conclusion was it was too short, right?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, I think we had a couple of interesting questions, mostly on, for instance, the applications or applying it to other moduses of transport as well. So the energy management solutions there. So from boat to from a difference between cars and boats. So I learned now that one of the big bottlenecks, I hadn't thought it through, but it's so logical, of course, that one of the big bottlenecks is that it takes a bit longer to charge a boat than a car. Just one operational issue, and we had some other questions about the next, what will be the next steps in let's say greening, because having just an electrolysis factory is of course very interesting, but that's not going to solve the entire thing. So you need to make the entire system ready for it, and that's where Dennis was cut off. So I hope that this is such an interesting topic. So I hope that there will also be some contact in the future with Dennis still. Anyway, afterwards we will be sharing a part of the presentation and the contact details of those speakers who want to get in touch with you all. So Dennis, I hope you also enjoyed that session.
Yes, it was really interesting, and I think you already gave a perfect summary, so I don't have too much to add to this.
Okay. So we're really glad to have such two great pitches right in the middle of the topic of resilience there. And now we move to the other side of the market, of the smart ports market. So now we're also going to ask, let's say, the problem owners, because these pitches, it's usually the solution owners who then start to pitch their story a little bit, and we've tried to turn the tables around as well. So with us now, we have two brave representatives from the ports side, from the demand side of the smart ports market here, who are willing to share their challenges and ideas that they have related to resilience topics. So on the one hand, we will have Ad Rijnen from the port of Moerdijk, which is, well, just about what will it be at 70 kilometers here north of Antwerp in the Netherlands. And it's one of the main inland hubs between, let's say, Antwerp and Rotterdam. So it is an important inland port. And the second reverse pitch we have, and Ad, of course, you will be expanding more on exactly what you'll be talking about, but to give it away briefly, Ad will be talking about AGV, an AGV well, corridor system, or actually parts of that. Sorry. The second speaker we have is Bart Pijmans from PSA, one of the largest terminal operators in Antwerp, and I think by extension also in the world. Haven't looked up the ranking, by the way. And Bart will actually be bringing not one, but two challenges for us. One relating to cold ironing or shore power, and the second one related to converting engines. So converting existing engines to use greener fuels, which was already one of the questions by the audience. So stay tuned for both, and I will first give Ad the floor. So Ad, if you'd like to share your slides, or should we do that for you?
So yes, I'm Ad Rijnen. One of my assignments is that I recently started to support the Port of Moerdijk in their SPEED project. And on behalf of the Port of Moerdijk, I'll talk with you about the AGV corridor. We'll do that to share first a little context, where you then have a better idea where the specific topic, the AGV project, is fitting in. Some questions we do have about the project, which is still embryonal, and the room for discussion later on. there are a lot of initiatives. I will not mention them here, but there are a lot of initiatives in Moerdijk with different stakeholders. And I like to show them on a map. A map where you can, for those not familiar, this is port area of Moerdijk with the Hollands Diep connecting it to the sea. And there are two main highways, this one and the one north-south from Rotterdam via Breda to Antwerp. And nowadays, more and more, it gets a little trouble. It has the reputation of being very accessible, but there is already some congestion here at this point, causing sometimes from what unwanted cut-off traffic through these wide lanes. There is a train connection, also north-south here, with a station called Lage Zwaluwe. And for instance, that train station was named one of the ugliest train stations in the Netherlands. So the railway authorities have a plan to upgrade it. And we are pushing to upgrade it also then into a mobility hub. But that's railway authorities. The municipality of Moerdijk is planning a truck parking somewhere here. Just a plan, not materialized. Port of Moerdijk, this area is becoming too small. They are developing here a completely new logistical park with value-added logistics. And they are planning an own road to avoid the highways, connecting this park to the port area. Because this port area is nicely fenced, I would say, and almost all the traffic goes through this main port to the port area. At this main port, there are some nice running projects like the camera there. Normal camera is using OCR techniques to read all and recognize the container registration. Can also recognize license plates and ADR, but we use it for container registration, put it in a dashboard. There are also some intelligent traffic lights here, connected with some infrastructure to the same dashboard. Still struggling what to do with it and with governance and these kind of things, but the thinking is we need to upgrade that to a kind of control tower. There is a plan again for municipality for shared mobility, more for persons. And this, I will be talking about later on, is the route for the heavy-duty automated guided vehicles, a newly built warehouse to the container terminal. But if you see this scattered pattern, the energy and the focus now is more on the ecosystem. If we think a little further and we could create this into something more integrated, we can improve our supply chain resilience for the traffic, but also in general. And there the biggest part is this thing. If we could combine here mobility hub, truck parking, more develop it into a real, what we call logistical disconnection point with all the facilities on it, we could do a lot of nice things like cargo priority, tracking last mile. If we would connect it to the Port of Moerdijk to be built control tower, there are all kind of nice things where kind of main topic is disconnect the traveling time. Disconnect the traveling time, the delivery time. That gives you planning options, a lot of stuff. It's just a thought. It's not really discussed with things, but that's more the thinking approach that for the total resilience, if we would have those initiatives more aligned towards something like that, with a logistical disconnection point, with all the initiatives on Moerdijk port area into a kind of control tower, we would connect and synchronize it. There would be opportunities to create also with that own road to be built, to have a kind of smart corridor where you can upstream, downstream, control traffic flows and the data use it for nice things. One of the key projects which will run the next years, but which needs to start yet, is this project, this specific topic. Heavy duty container AGV, not new. This picture is at the port of Rotterdam of 2009. So technology is not that new, but what do we want to do in Moerdijk? In Moerdijk, it's a study to investigate the automation and electrification of the transport of containers between that warehouse and the terminal using those AGVs. That specific functionality, it needs to not only travel, but it needs to go to a docking station and do a lot of more things. But maybe the most remarkable and most biggest challenge is the part of the study where we will do together with authorities an investigation. What are the restraints or the opportunities if we travel on public road? Because some of the routing now is public road. We can do fencing and those kind of things, but is it necessary? But for Port of Moerdijk, that project is a crucial piece in their journey to resilience, because the learnings of this, we can use them in that to be created own road. And maybe we have to do like a total separation, but maybe we can also interfere with traffic. So that's kind of thing why it is important. And in general, if you would embed more autonomous and intelligent vehicles on your port area, the data and the connections you have, you can also use maybe for new business models to be explored. Advantages of eAGVs, obvious, your electrification will increase your emission resilience, especially in the Netherlands. The worry is becoming a pain, the worry about the shortage of labor force. So drivers especially, it can be a solution, more AGVs. And don't underestimate this one. For your stakeholders, the business case is really rapidly solid. It generates really productivity by reducing costs and can be interesting. If you go further, it can also, if you embed more of those vehicles and you increase your connectability, it can improve your resilience, because you can then improve and more control your traffic flows in order to avoid increasing congestions of other kind of stuff. But maybe the last one, if you then go more data-driven and you need to share data for this, that might also be interesting for new business models with new questions about roles and responsibilities and governance. These are the more obvious advantages of the AGVs. But by running this project like we want to do, you have some bonus advantages that if you are going to share AGVs, you share infra, you share system, that might boost also your cluster development of some logistical companies. And in a second step, it might also, in your total ecosystem, boost your connectivity and your working together approach, because you do need Port Authority, maybe other authorities, just for companies, tech providers. We intend to do it with a lot of students and startups, so it will stimulate knowledge development. And we intend to do it in an open way, so it might also accelerate knowledge dissemination to other small ports of these kind of techniques. It is still, as said, embryonal, that word I learned from Wouter. So we need to kick off coming weeks with some companies. It will run for sure next year and year after. So I would be appreciating the feedback, general feedback, but maybe also specific attention points on functional technical aspects, on governance, legal aspects, ecosystem. Maybe you have experience to share, have advice on parties to involve. And that's from Moerdijk. Thank you for your attention and ready to take questions and have some discussion with each other. Thank you.
Okay, thank you a lot, Ad, for this innovative concept, which shows that you don't always need to be the biggest to be able to think innovatively. Sometimes it even helps that you don't have too many fixed interests to manage. So we've now had the first challenge, a reverse pitch by Ad Rijnen, and we will now start moving towards the second reverse pitch, which was by, and I did make a slight mistake. It's not just PSA Antwerp. So Bart Paymans is actually representing Antwerp Terminal Services, which is actually the service company, which he will now explain, of course. And he'll be talking then about the green straddle carriers and shore power. So if all is right, you should now see my screen. And Bart, please do take the floor.
Thank you, Wouter. Can you see my screen? Okay, good
yes.
Morning still, everyone. And thank you for the introduction. So my name is Bart Paymans, and I am a sustainability manager for Antwerp Terminal Services. And we're providing service for the MPET and PSA container terminals in Antwerp. And as Wouter said in the beginning, we do have a problem indeed. So we have a very flexible way of operating, a good operational model using straddle carriers only. But this type of operation is also very hard to reduce the carbon emissions. So I hope in this presentation I will give you an overview of the direction we want to go, the link with the Pioneers project, and some open questions on what would be the best way for us to proceed. So for those who are not familiar with our terminals, I've included 3 pictures. This is the MPET terminal, and it is at the Deurhangdok on the left side of the River Schelde. This is our biggest terminal. Then we have a Noordzee terminal. This is on the right side bank. It's the second largest terminal we have. And then we have finally a Europa terminal. That is the third terminal. It's also the oldest terminal we have currently. So our group, the PSA International Group, has the ambition to reduce our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 50% in 2030. And this is the absolute emission reduction, meaning that if we grow our capacity, then of course we have to reduce more emissions. By 2030, we want to reduce emissions by 75%, and in 2050, we have the ambition to be carbon neutral. So let's give an overview first of what are the big consumptions we have on the terminal. And here you can see the energy consumption expressed in terajoule. So this is really the energy. And you can see by far that our straddle carriers have the largest contribution. So this is really where we have to focus on. Then we have the key cranes and the reefers. So these are electrical consumers. And since we purchase green electricity already from 2019 onwards, they normally do not have any Scope 2 emissions in our reporting. And then we have a few smaller contributions. So our focus is in Scope 1 and 2 on the fuel straddle, on the straddle carriers. So how do we think we can achieve this target? We have a number of projects that are launched. And maybe the first one is to mention that for Europa Terminal, we are already transitioning to another operational model using stacking cranes, electrical stacking cranes. And of course, from a sustainability point of view or an emission point of view, this is really the most logical choice. It uses direct green electricity with the highest efficiency, so without any transitional fuels. So that's definitely recommended. Even when using stacking cranes, there is still transport needed from the key cranes to the stacking cranes, and currently that is still performed by shuttle runners or stacking or straddle carriers. So that's why our second focus is to really see how can we make those straddle carriers more green. What are the different options? And a third initiative that is launched is to look at shore power. In our container terminals, we have flexible berth locations. The ships are not always at the same location. We have many ships, like in MPET, we often have 10 ships at the same time. So shore power is complex. It's not easy to integrate that in an existing terminal. The distances between the key cranes and the ships are very reduced, and there is lots of operations going on. So there we also have set up a full program to look to what are the best suitable technologies for our type of terminals. So let's zoom in on these green straddle carriers. We actually set up a kind of reduction menu where we look at short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and in the form of a menu card, what are the best options to do at this moment. And what we can do at this moment is to transition to hybrid straddle carriers, so that's including a battery pack for regeneration, or to switch to biofuels. On a midterm, we think we have two important pathways, either electrification or hydrogen, and the midterm is actually preparing us for that in the form of dual fuel technology. With hydrogen, we can mix hydrogen in the existing engines, and in the form of making these electric hybrid straddle carriers towards a plug-in hybrid, we can pave the way for a full electrification. So here, to get a bit summarized, electrification is actually our prime candidate because it uses the electricity with the highest efficiency. You have to see that the full energy transition, green energy will become scarce. Everybody will want to electrify its application, and then it's important to do that with the highest efficiency. The challenge is it possible for us? So we've set up a first demonstration, I'll show that later, to see whether we can really do that. Because those straddle carriers are 24/7 active, and they don't wait a lot of time. And they do have a high energy consumption. So batteries give us limited autonomy and reduced charging time, and that's really a challenge. The other path we're looking at is mainly green hydrogen, which can greatly improve our autonomy, and the time to refuel is, of course, smaller, more reduced. And we think that this dual fuel technology is a good transition technology. It allows us to prepare the terminal for a full hydrogen takeoff, and that we can take our time for that. So, yeah, of course, you can talk a lot about the different options and investigate them. Really think that we should test it in operations, in actual operations, to know whether it can really work. And for that reason, we've set up a number of demonstrators. And by 2024, which is actually now within 2 years, we want to be ready and have our conclusion on which way to go. Is it the hydrogen? We're doing 2 demonstrations. Is it electrification, or are it even other alternative fuels? So this is our schedule of the demonstrators. The first one, and it's also part of the Pioneers program, is this transformation of an existing straddle carrier to a hydrogen powered straddle carrier. And in this first test, it's mainly a demonstration. We can inject up to 30% of hydrogen into the engine. And in additional tests, we probably can increase that to a much higher value. It's a robust and reliable technique in case the supply of hydrogen is not fully available yet. You can fully continue on diesel. So that's the advantage. It's really dual fuel, comes with a robustness. So our replacement roadmap in a nutshell, here you can see over the coming 10 years, the amount of diesel straddle carriers is going down because we're not going to renew them. And in the first coming years, we want to continue with hybrid straddle carriers. And then we would transition to these dual fuel straddle carriers. And finally, maybe straddle carriers that allow 100% hydrogen usage. Looking to the emissions, you can clearly see that the emissions are at the end going down, meeting our target in comparison with the orange line being the case where we do nothing and we just continue with diesel. So for us, what are the challenges? I think hydrogen the question is it really available for us? Because we need a high amount of hydrogen. For MPET, it could be about 10 tons per day, or PSA terminals about 6 tons per day. These are huge quantities, and that will only work if we can have direct connections on pipelines. But even then, it needs to be available on the market. It requires a 14 megawatt electrolyzer. So these are really large volumes. And of course, the price is at the moment high, but when you do a high offtake, we expect it can be lower. But it's also a concern in this pathway. There's also consideration on the weight, because we really have to protect those tanks very well. We need a lot of steel for that. Currently, the ratio is a factor 100. We need 3,000 kilogram structure to accommodate 30 kilogram of hydrogen. And that brings me actually to also one of the questions of this presentation. What do you think is the best way for us? Can maybe green methanol also be a solution for us, solving the difficulties of transporting and storing hydrogen on mobile equipment? So I've summarized it in a number of questions. What do we think that the efficiency looks like for green methanol? If we do some quick calculation, we think it even may be worse than green hydrogen. So quite low efficiency. And that brings me to the question, what do we expect the cost will be? Will it be competitive to hydrogen? And how do we see it? What is needed on the engine side? Can we modify existing engines? And by what time frame do we think hydrogen could become available on a large scale? And the last question is maybe the relation to shore power. We see that the shipping lines also have to go through this energy transition. They're looking mainly to alternative fuels like green methanol and green ammonia. And then the question is there at our side, how do we see that in relation with shore power? Is shore power then really an intermediate technology for 5 to 10 years, up to the point where the ships are capable of running on these green fuels, and we do not need to go through this full phase? And that's one of the questions we also have. That was it from my side. I hope I was within the 10 minutes.
Thanks a lot for that, Bart. So my words were not ill-chosen when I said that these were indeed two brave presenters, representatives of the port sector here. And not only are they here willing to share their their challenges towards you, which is something we don't commonly see that much in the port sector. They're also here to open up their innovation initiatives. So in the breakout rooms, I've just opened them. It's again the same routine, so you can already start choosing your breakout room. It's this icon with the 4 windows underneath. But so here the intention is the speakers here, they have also prepared some questions, but they're also opening up their challenges and their innovation initiatives here. They're looking for partners who have some knowledge, some insights on this, who wants to partner up in this innovation journey. And perhaps a last testament of how brave some of these testimonials are is just as we saw in the slides by Bart, that they're not afraid to fail. So they are testing out these different technologies, knowing that some of them will fail, but still they try. And that's actually that's quite refreshing to see here. So I hope you can all be inspired a little bit by their bravery and their insights. And I hope you all have a good discussion. So the breakout rooms are open. Your sessions your session was also interesting. At least the one we had with ATS was. We had some good questions. We just have a couple of final words for everyone. So as you can see here, we have TomorrowPorts has become a little bit of a brand name. So we first intended to do a big conference today, but as you can imagine with COVID, we had to revise that plan a little bit. So we brought a more focused session here today for you all. And that doesn't mean that we still don't want to organize the conference. So on March 24th of next year, we will be organizing a larger conference with at least 1 or maybe even 2 days filled with content and chances of interaction. I guess we can all agree here that this was sometimes the most exciting part of the session and the interaction, and it was mainly too short. So on a live conference, we should have plenty of opportunities for that. A second thing I wanted to still share with you is a platform that we have built as Speed. It's a free of charge platform for every smart port innovator. It's an innovation platform where on the one hand, the ports can share their challenges, as we have now seen with the reverse pitches. So we have 38 of them on our Speed smart port platform, and this QR code takes you to it. And no worries, we will still share the slides, so you can also visit it in your own time. And lastly, we also want to share with you another initiative that we have, another free of charge initiative, which is called the Smart Port Barometer, where we are trying to gauge the maturity of different actors in different port areas. So it's tailored to the kind of actor you are. As a terminal operator, you will get different questions than when you're a freight forwarder, for instance, or a port authority. And this barometer will give you a view on how you score on your smart port maturity on the dimensions of safety and security, port operations, synchro modality, energy and environment, and capability. And we will also be able to compare you to your closest peers, to your most relevant peers on this. So if you would be interested in a benchmark like that, please do reach out to us, and we will invite you for the Smart Port Barometer. And that being said, I would now like to give the floor to Valentin for the really final words.
Yeah, also from my side, a big thank you to everybody for participating and being able to stay until the end of this session. I know that it was not an easy exercise to that. So we are going to send you the slides indeed, and there you are going to find the links and how to register to the future events as well, to fill in the Smart Port Barometer, or also to partnership in spreading out the word about it. One more thing that I want to launch and to announce: the webinar enthusiasts out there, or the ones amongst you who are looking to learn more about port challenges there, next week on Thursday, also in the framework of Pioneer project and the Smart Ports 2025, going to be another webinar there organized with 4 challenges that are going to be pitched, and as well with interesting discussions. So there we are looking for tech providers to join in, but also for port stakeholders as well, to learn what are possibilities there to enable further innovation. So that was my my word there. Once again, I hope this session was inspiring for you, useful for you, and that you can have useful takeaways for next projects there. So follow us on LinkedIn for similar events like this. So up to next time, see you. I say goodbye and enjoy lunch, a very late line.
Okay, or your turkey run. Bye.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Goodbye, everybody.